Welcome to Pop and Play, the podcast all about play and pop culture and how it shapes our lives. I'm Nathan Holbert, and with me, as always, is Haney, King of Kong, Yoon.
Okay, I was not expecting that at all. Okay. Anyway, I'm Haney Yoon, and today we are very excited to welcome our guest, CT1 Associate Professor of Philosophy at the University of Utah. Go Utah.
Hello.
Former food writer, current philosopher of games and technology. T has published 2 books, Games Agency as Art, which is the first entry into our introduction of his work, and his newest book, The Score, which we're excited to talk with him about today. Welcome, T.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us today. We're excited for you to be around and for you to pop over here and hang out with us on the podcast. Haney and I, as Haney mentioned, we kind of came across your work with Games Agency as Art, and I believe you sent me a text message about it and just kind of like just dropped it in my text message, and I read it and I was like, oh my God, this is so great. This is what we've been talking about.
And we read the New Yorker article, which was great.
So we're really excited for you to be here to hang out with us today.
Wait, I really need to know what people from the Teachers College, what was the passionate excitement point in the Games Agency as Art stuff?
Do you want to go first? Because you went down a rabbit hole. Over one weekend.
I think this is kind of a core punchline too of the Score about kind of why we play and the ways in which kind of our motivations and our interests and our values. There's places where they conflict. There's places where they're sort of freely flowing. But that sort of sense of like games as a space for playing with agency, for kind of exploring how we can act and why we can act and what it means to act, I think is like really fun and exciting to us.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like you're now hosting this podcast and asking us questions.
Such a turn of the tables.
I think for me, okay, I read that New York article. I was in bed, okay? So I'm like scrolling, looking at the New York article. I think that was my first reading, and then I started the Games Art and Agency. And I think it reminded me of this pivot that I had in my life. I had a philosophical moment where after COVID, which happened to coincide with when I got tenure, right?
Yeah.
Like I was starting to think about like, why am I so guided and centralizing these metrics of my performance and success when I'm not thinking about like play for play's sake, right? Or thinking about like, maybe these metrics have gotten me to this point, but it's maybe gotten me to this point where I really need to pivot and think about a different way to measure myself.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 2 levels of this question for me. Like, so the question of the book is like, why are scoring systems so fun in games and so awful in institutions?
Yes.
And trying to explain that. But I think there's another, it's not quite the same section, but there's this thing underneath that I really care about, which is like, even when we're talking about games in the classroom and games in education, like a thing I've been kind of upset about is there's so many people who talk about play in this kind of context try to instrumentalize it and try to like make it for something else. And I mean, I'm guilty of this too.
God, yes, you're speaking my language.
Yeah, so like I will, during this book, like the story is in the book, but like one of the weirder things to do is I learned to yo-yo. And the reason I learned to yo-yo, by the way, is I was going down a YouTube rabbit hole of looking for examples of cases where I thought a stylish, beautiful, expressive, aesthetic hobby got changed by a competition scene. So skateboarding is definitely
skateboarding was in there as well. Yeah.
But I was also I was like, what about? And I was just trying stuff, and I found yo-yo. And again, it's this case where there's this like this beautiful, flowing, expressive style. I wouldn't say it gets corrupted, but it gets changed deeply into speed and difficulty oriented competition scene. So I get into it, and I started yo-yo. And let me just say, I'll talk about this at the top here, but in the book I say it at the end because everyone gives me such weird looks. And it's this beautiful thing where you're yo-yoing and the yo-yo's like, they're very fluid. The modern ones will spin for 2 or 3 minutes. You create these really beautiful knot structures and it just feels like very rhythmic and very sensual and very like mobile and freeing, and I love it. And when people ask me about it, I almost always say like, yeah, it's a really good work reset, and it like really clears my mind and helps me solve problems. And it like, gets me, and in some sense, like what I fall into, and I can feel it, is this like play is justified if it helps you work more. And what I actually want to say is like, no, right? The reason we work is to support a life full of play.
Yeah.
And yet it's so easy on the other side to push the play is good if it's developmental, or it helps
Yeah.
build grit, or if it
Yeah.
resets you, or if it helps you meditate in order
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
solve
yeah.
your work problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I fall into that, and it's true it does all these things for me.
Yeah.
But also I kind of hate it.
Yeah.
Well, the pressure to, part of it might be the pressure for that you genuinely feel that way, but also part of it might be the pressure to feel like I need to explain why I'm yo-yoing to Haney so she's not judging the time that I've spent on the
Right.
Yeah.
yo-yo, right?
I judge you
She
constantly.
does. Always. Yeah. I never do the same to you, by the way.
But it is like, I guess like this is skipping to the end of the book, but like,
Perfect.
I think the whole point is that the world of outcomes and metrics, the answer to that question, a center of that world is it's rigidified. It's rigidified because the demand is that the values be understandable to everyone instantly,
Right.
that
Yep.
it's in some kind of standard value currency.
Yep.
And play is the place where we're let loose to find things that, like, you don't need anybody but you or a friend, a couple friends around your like role-playing table to like the story you're telling. And by its nature, when you're freed up in that way, what you do will seem weird and stupid. I've almost started to think that, like, in some sense, if you're looking for pockets of genuine, authentic play and joy, really authentic, you should look for things that the world thinks are stupid. Because stupidity is the label.
I'm crushing it, by the way, then. I'm killing it in life.
Oh my God.
Okay. Well, I want to get into some questions for you about your book. And I want to start with, you already kind of mentioned this, that a kind of core topic of the book has to do with metrics, right? It's called The Score. You kind of get into the ways in which things designed in the world kind of force us into certain patterns, but also the way in which metrics can be playful, right? How like rules and structures of games can invite us to play in a way that we wouldn't normally do without them. So I have a long-standing argument with a colleague, a frequent guest on the show, Lalitha Vasudevan, about whether or not rules...
Oh, wow. I didn't know you were going to call her
I
out.
called her out. She's listening. Whether or not rules are necessary for games and play. Like, are rules... are they like a necessary condition? Not necessarily
Right.
rules that got started ahead of time, but rules are maybe they're planned ahead, maybe they're emergent, but rules are necessary component of play. So, can you answer for us finally, as the expert on the topic?
Okay.
And I want to know, why am I right
Oh my God. I'm about to fight
that
you.
rules are necessary?
Okay. I have a bunch of answers.
Okay.
Some of it are boring, and I think there's a real different question.
Okay. Good.
Oh,
So
Philosophers.
philosopher.
So I think first of all, games and play are different concepts, and I think that's important to keep separated.
Yeah.
So Bernard Suits, my favorite philosopher of games,
Yeah.
he has this example where he's like, look, some games are play and some are not. So he says a lot of gameplay, like you're doing the thing. So the way so let's back up. So the way he defines a game is playing a game is voluntarily taking on unnecessary obstacles
Right.
to create the struggle to overcome them. So it's obstacles for the sake of something valuable
Right.
of the struggle.
So Bernard Suits says I'm right.
Wait, hold on. And then he says play is redirecting in normally instrumental resources for intrinsically valuable activity.
Right, right.
Or the short version of that is like wasting resources for fun.
Right, right.
So he points out that they are separate, they overlap a lot, but if we play a board game for fun, that's a game and a play. If you are a boxer and you hate boxing, but it's the only source of income for you, that's a game, but it's work, not play. And if you're just screwing around with your friends, like kids rolling around in the dirt or people like suddenly spontaneously food fighting, that's play, but not a game.
Okay.
So games have rules, but that's just definitional. Like that's what a game
Yeah.
is. A game is you
Yeah.
take on constraints that shape an activity.
Yeah.
And when you're doing the thing inside those constraints, like that like one way to put it is that what Suits is saying is games are things where you add rules and you invent new kinds of activity that never
Right.
existed before, right? Like, so
You-
there's no such thing as dribbling or layup without the rules of basketball.
You actually answered a really important question for me because I feel like a couple of weeks ago you heard me say this. I was sort of like, I am really invested in the idea of play. And I really, it's part of my research. It's part of how I think about my life. It's part of how I've tried to shift my priorities and things like that. But I don't like games. Okay. I'm not, I wouldn't say my favorite thing to do is to play games. Like playing games feels like work for me because I don't see games and play as synonyms. I don't see them as necessarily the same things, right? And I feel like you answered a really important key there, which is that Nathan isn't always right.
I'm excited because I think if I put it right, my answer will piss you both off.
Oh,
Okay.
this is perfect.
Oh, good.
So there is deeply a kind of play that is completely accessible without rules. Another, Maria Lagona is my other favorite philosopher of play,
Yes.
says that play is lightly shifting between worlds. Again, if you're just changing perspectives lightly and easily, you can be playful without playing games. And she agrees with you that the height of play is ruleless play where you're just moving of your own accord. I don't think so. I think they're two very different forms of play, and that the playing we do with games has a distinctive magic that's completely different from ruleless play. So, I mean, here's what I'm going to put. I have a friend. Some of the stuff is just addressed in my head to a friend of mine who had the same view as you. That was like, her way of putting it would be like, play is free, play is creative. I can be myself. Like, why would I ever follow the rules? And we'd go to the climbing gym and she'd be like, why would I ever follow the rules of like this particular route or that one? I'm just going to play.
And then she falls.
Well, no, actually, it's the opposite.
It's easier.
If you don't, so the rules in the rock climbing gym are here are these specific routes that are set on this color hold, and you have to stay to those. So if you don't follow those rules and use everything, you're never going to get past a particular difficulty level, and you're never going to experience. I mean, I think one of the interesting things is that a set rock climb, a specific set of holds, because of the particular difficulty involved, can teach you a way of moving. Like you never had to like control your hips that much before. You never had to slide so precisely before, but this particular challenge shapes that. I think something similar happens with a lot of games because games are such tight structures, because they specify goals so carefully and they specify constraints so carefully. They are little sculptures of action, and they can plunge you into kinds of action that you never had before. So I think my favorite board game, which is completely evil, is the game Imperial.
Right, yeah.
And so Imperial is a board game where it's World War I and all the countries are fighting, but you don't play the countries. You play shadowy investors changing investments in the countries to control the war for profit.
Oh my God.
It's awful. But what it teaches
dark
you
as hell.
is the way the game is played is like, I think one of the first times I didn't get it, and then in the middle of the first game, like I controlled England, and my friend Sarah controlled Germany, and Germany was about to attack England, and I thought war was inevitable, and I was like, oh no, I just need to sell her some cheap stock in England, and now she's co-invested, and so I did not have access to this kind of co-incentive thinking, but the specific structure of the game pushed me there.
Yeah.
So one way to think about it is like games are a way of communicating play. Because there are different forms of play, and games stabilize a specific kind. And there is a fantasy in which you didn't need games. And that is the fantasy in which without structure, we would be perfectly creative. But what the world actually teaches us is without structure, we often just follow particular habits and we don't expand. For me, I mean, it's in the book, but I think for me, it's kind of like the idea of like recipes. Like recipes might be too constraining, but if you never follow, but they're also how you learn a new cuisine that's different.
Yep.
And so this, like the rigidity, all communication requires some rigidity. Like, imagine if you're like, why do I need to follow the rules of language? I'll just interpret any words I want. And the answer is, nice freedom, you'll never learn anything. Or
communicate.
Or communicate, right? And I think games are a way of communicating. I mean, play can be deeply freeing. And I think if you are stuck on one game and you can never depart from those rules, it'll trash your freedom. But if you use games to like traipse across the landscape of different actions and explore different ways of being that you might not have had until they're fixed in a game, then this is increasing your vocabulary. This is like creating new possibilities for you.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is that I feel like games or things related to that, like recipe following or set of rules, I feel like it kind of gives you a structure to enter into something. And I think, like you said, it kind of gives you a structure into something that maybe you haven't experienced before. Because I think about the recent role-playing game experience that we had. And I feel like if I was never forced into that situation, I would never have thought about how interesting and delightful it is to create a narrative and a story together and to actually engage in something that wasn't comfortable for me. And it was in a safe confine of these structures, right, that kind of helped me enter.
The rules create that kind of invitation, right? And they also then they also nudge you and poke you in ways that, like you said, you may not have tried, or they help you like figure out how to move your hips in a way that you wouldn't normally try to kind of explore and control. I mean, I think that's where, for me, the argument around kind of my stance about the importance of rules is not rules as a word. I mean, I often am telling my design students that this word constraints feels negative, but constraints are incredibly empowering and inventive, and rules I feel like are the same way. The word has this connotation which sounds negative and it sounds sort of top down, but oftentimes, like, if you have a kid who's like hopping on just the white lines as they cross the street, that's obviously play. I think we would all agree with that, but that's also a rule that they gave themselves just like kind of spontaneously when they were crossing the street. And so I don't know, I think of rules as actually being these like fun little like ways of kind of tinkering and exploring the world.
I have terrible news for you, but this thought is also in Rousseau. I mean, no, really. No, so, So, I mean, part of the core idea of Rousseau, I mean, is that rules and governance adopted freely actually increase our freedom and rights. Like the entire idea of Rousseau is that if you thought that no rules meant more freedom, right, then think about the state of nature where everyone can kill each other. That what we construct larger freedoms, positive freedoms. I'm really dragging down the tone here. By creating structures that create newer, richer freedoms, like the freedom to walk around without being killed, and I think like there's something really interesting. So I have this like really simple example sometimes. Like imagine an empty field. You can move in any direction. You're free. Imagine we add a room with doors that lock and windows. In a sense, you're constrained because you can't move in every direction. But in a sense, what you have is a richer option set, right? You can be inside or outside. And I think that's an interesting thing that games do is they create their creative structure. I mean, okay, this is going to sound weird, but there's a way in which building walls is both an act of constraint and it's architecture. It's creating new spaces for us to inhabit. And I kind of think that's what games are simultaneously. But unlike a lot of other things, games, at least at their best, should be voluntary. And so you can enter the structure and then you can take it down as you please. And so it seems like a deeper meta freedom.
So we solved it.
I mean, it's basically what you're saying in your book. It's the idea that these rules, we engage in them because it's the process rather than focusing on the outcome of it, right? Like, what do you gain by the process of going through these obstacles and challenges and rules? And what is the, functional feeling of that? But then what is also the affective feeling of engaging in that way? Yeah,
that seems to me to be like one of the most exciting parts of what you talk about here is you really do focus on process and the kind of like messiness and beauty and the ways in which things like games or various kinds of play can not force us, but really prime us to live in the process, live in those experiences and those moments. And that's something we certainly talk a lot about in education too, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the interesting things about this Bernard Suits book, The Grasshopper, that I'm obsessed with, is that So he's an Aristotle scholar, and he's, I think, just vibing with the original Aristotelian idea that the meaning of life comes from rich activity, not from outcomes. But I think what Suits thinks is that it's a truth you don't need games to acknowledge, but games force you to acknowledge. Like they rub your face in it, right? Like why would you put on unnecessary constraints if you actually just wanted the outcome? The only explanation is that you value something about the process. And I think like for me, what games force us to think of, not all games, I think like, so for the important distinction for me here is between achievement play and striving play.
Right.
So achievement play is playing because you value winning, and striving play is temporarily taking on an interest in winning so you can have the process. And I think with striving play, I mean, the best way to put it is in ordinary life, you take the means for the sake of the ends. But in game life, you take the ends for the sake of the means. And it's so, I mean, like I'm a rock climber, and it's so clear to me that I need to invest myself in the intense desire to get to the top, or it won't be like kind of thrilling and intense. But the moment I get to the top, I immediately lower off, right? Like you don't,
like, let's do it again.
yeah, or like, and I think games, and this is, I think, why games and play are often so underrated, because, I mean, I think the world we're living in has been perverted, and the correct view is that the point of making stuff is either that the stuff is interesting, that it's a good process, or it like supports us in further interesting activities or process. And instead, like the world I just thought of the worst thing to say. The world we're in is one where we value the outcome so much that we push ourselves into grinding miserable processes. And we keep piling up more outcomes and making the processes worse and worse until like, and then you're like, where's the value? What's the, where did the importance go? Okay, here's the incredibly terrible thing that I just thought of. So I love this moment in Tim Rogers. He's a really good game critic, and his old website, Action Button, he has this review of The Sims Social, which is one of the early free-to-play games that engineered the kind of free-to-play structure. And he says, free-to-play games like this are essentially evil because in order to get money from you, they need to first addict you to winning, and then make the process of play so miserable that you're willing to pay to skip the process of play. And he says, right, that's an essentially evil structure because they're addicting you to something that is meaningless, where the only meaning it could have been, the point could have had, was to have an interesting process. And then they are janking the process.
Right.
And I kind of think the world we're in has applied that logic to everything.
It's fully, it's all Farmville. I'm going to need you to have a little more evidence that the world is a mess, though, please. That you can just say that without any sort of evidence.
No.
I wonder, though, so I want to, we've been kind of dancing around a question that certainly I know is in my mind a lot, and Haney kind of mentioned something similar earlier about the ways in which, some people, some of us find ourselves in places where metrics are driving everything. Many of our students are having to kind of really focus on metrics. Certainly, whenever we were working on tenure or other like levels of promotion, we're thinking about metrics and how people are going to evaluate us. In your book, you talk about the sort of philosophy rankings and things. I mean, what do we do with that? Like sometimes we are stuck in these systems, whether or not, and stuck in a way that, I mean, let me maybe add a little layer to this. Like I find great pleasure and joy in my work, and to continue to do this work in which I find the process meaningful and beautiful, I also have to play this other game, right? How do we think about that? How do we push back on those competing pressures?
Can I add? And I think we were talking about how for some people those pressures are very high stakes, right? And so I think we were discussing how it's so easy for us on this side of tenure to be like, let's not worry about metrics. Let's try to make things creative and fun and less serious, right? And less high stakes. But then I think we forgot that on the other side of tenure, we were not having that same kind of mentality, right? And then at the same time, we're trying to really work with and collaborate with our grad students around, trying to think of a different kind of academia, right? And a different kind of metric to think to evaluate success or achievement or whatever that might mean to them. But it's really hard to convince people to sit outside of that.
There's like two answers to the question. One of them is addressed to the individual who has no power over the institution and has to survive.
Yeah.
And the other is addressed to the kinds of people that have some degree of institutional power. Especially, I know this is an education podcast. It's funny because a lot of educators mostly think of themselves as under the gun of metrics and scoring system design because they have to report outcomes and all this stuff. But they are also creators of scoring systems for their students.
Yeah.
And
100%.
one of the ironies, behind a lot of this book was kind of rage at some of my colleagues who would complain about the authoritarian metric structures they were given and then turn around and apply aggressively authoritarian grading systems in their class. This is deeply related to my experience during COVID, by the way, of professors who talked about the horrors of authoritarian surveillance and then forced their students to take tests with eye tracking software. To avoid cheating. And I know someone who taught and made their students take a class on Foucault's analysis of the horrors of surveillance via a highly surveilled, like you have to have the camera on for the entire process of writing. And it's like, gee. So, and I think with educators it's super interesting because we do have so much control. Maybe we'll have control at an administrative level, but at least of our classrooms, we have a fair degree of control.
Yeah.
So let me talk about the individual level first when you're under the gun, and then I'll flip. But I think an important thing with metrics, actually, if you hate them, is to realize what's good about them. Because I think there's a false negativity that's actually deeply optimistic. That's like, metrics are terrible, and it imagines there's some perfect world without them, and I don't think that's there. I think even if you hate them, you have to acknowledge what they're for. The best analysis of this came from Theodore Porter for me, the historian of quantification, who I found so clarifying about this. In his claim, and he was trying to understand why administrators and politicians loved metrics too much, his thought was that qualitative and quantitative information was good for different things, and you had to understand what they were good and bad at for, and then balance them, and the worry was overreaching. So he says that qualitative information is nuanced, open-ended, dynamic, context-sensitive, but it travels badly between contexts because you need a lot of shared background information. So think like qualitative writing on student essays.
Students, I hope you're listening.
Yeah.
Method students.
The grades, quantitative information travels well between contexts because it's been designed to be. So his claim is that what data is a structure of information that's been designed to be portable, and it's designed to be portable by stripping out high context, high nuance, high background information. So if you move to letter grades, right, since everyone understands them approximately the same way, then they can be comprehended at different levels of institution, and then they can aggregate instantly. And the insight that I find so terrifying and so interesting is that the social power and usefulness of metrics is inextricably bound up with their thinness and their information lossiness, right? It's the context stripping that makes them do that job. So I think that to understand how to live with metrics, you have to understand that they are useful and that they allow large-scale data aggregation and a certain kind of objectivity and they're a quick reference for large-scale collective communication precisely because they're so lossy and insensitive. So that you can see what they're good for, right? If you need to track something quickly at scale, what you can also see exactly what they're bad for, which is highly nuanced, highly context-sensitive information. And so I think there's an ideal, which is hard, which is to treat them as very rough approximate proxies that are useful for fast communication, but are going to lose most of any particular nuance. And so you have to treat them at very rough arm's length. I think one of my favorite examples here is like, BMI. Like, I think a lot of people know that BMI is a terrible health measure, but it originally started as a public health metric where if a huge population suddenly jumped up or down BMI massively, you knew something was up.
Right.
And so you had, for that purpose.
It's like an aggregate measure.
Yeah. For that purpose, it's fine.
Yeah.
But that's a very minimal purpose. It's when you start letting it intrude into setting a personal notion of, if you understand that, you should understand that it's ridiculous that you would ever use that to set a personal notion of health. So the problem is that it's hard to keep at arm's length for two reasons. One is because it's so catchy and because it's so clearly communicable, it becomes easier to communicate yourself. This is what we're talking about at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's hard to communicate the joy of yo-yo because there's a joy of yo-yo metric. It's easy to communicate. If I yo-yo more, I write more pages per day because that's a communicable standard. And it's also hard because I think insofar as large-scale institutions can't exchange subtle reasons, then they're just going to attach all they're going to see, their operating logic is going to be by the clear metrics, and their incentives will be attached to them. And so we have this weird space where we're going to be incentivized by these simple metrics, and yet no, they can't capture the value of what we're doing. And so if we want to live under them without having our souls destroyed, we have to have cultivate some distance from the thing that gives us incentives, where it'd be so much easier and so much more clear if you could just be like, all I care about is what makes good outcomes.
Yeah. Or ways to put context back in. I mean, I feel like that's often what we're thinking about when we're thinking about like tenure packets, right? Is like, how do you put all the context back into that so it's not just a number of publications, a number of citations, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think as you were talking, it was making me think about these incentives and measures for the greater good, let's say. And it's kind of made me think about like even the striving that we did to get tenure, that some of it is if we can distance our own value from it, like our own self-worth, but then also think about how that maybe can lead to things like institutional power or decision-making or choices, or make things make things more bearable or humane, right, for whatever the next generation of people is going to be, or for the greater good, right, or for the well-being of other people. I think that actually is kind of a helpful way to think about it. Because I was thinking back, like personally, about how I arrived at this, and I realized like the reason why I don't like games is the idea that you have to win or that you have to achieve something, right? And like you talked about that, like the achievement versus the striving. And I think all my life, like my parents are Korean immigrants, and they have a very distinct way of measuring success, right, and achievement. And not because they're like horrible people, but because that's kind of the situation or the context that they were sort of living in, and that's sort of the aspirations that they had for me. So I think about like all of these like outputs and these measures as related to achievement, and that you cannot fail in those achievements, right? And so the idea of like games, like winning a game does not actually satisfy me at all. Losing a game is also kind of horrible. So therefore I don't really like games. I only like Candy Crush because I just play against myself, right? And so I think it took me a while to kind of shift how I think about games, how I think about play, like to understand that, I can still struggle and strive for something and get pleasure out of it, but could also just do something like the equivalent of a silly party game, right? Because that also brings me joy. And this idea that I can actually work for an end product of joy, or the process of joy, versus I have to work to achieve something that if I fail at, I'm going to feel really bad. And I think it took me a while to realize, like, if I fail, I'm not going to feel really bad. It's actually fine.
I mean, I think to crystallize something, I think that is underneath what you were saying. I mean, I think there's one way of thinking about the awfulness of the achievement childhood that I also have, that combines it with games, like, oh, you're trying to win. But I think another way to think about it is that the big difference between work and play is that in work, the goals are set by some external force, and you can't screw around with them. Like, what gets you money or what gets you status is set by the world, and you're kind of trapped by that. And the forces that made that did not make them for your joy. And with games, you can fight to win, but you've chosen which wins you want, and you've chosen them if they give you joy. And if they do not, you can
leave.
You can leave. And I think that's the crucial. It's so dumb, but what is the mysterious difference between games and institutions? Games, you can leave, or you can change, and It is such an idiotically dumb insight to try to push as a philosopher. But yeah, it's different when something is self-chosen and self-tailorable as opposed to distant, harsh, and unmodifiable to your needs. Like, they're different.
Yeah. It's like what you were saying at the beginning about games, that they're not always about fun, right?
Yeah.
It could be dangerous, it could be violent, it could be hard, it could be difficult, right? So we don't have this singular version of what that is. I do want to end with a very, very serious question.
Okay.
So your book also got me hungry because you talk about food a lot. You talk about different recipes. You talk about ratatouille and chili verde. And there's a part where you talk about how you're obsessed with getting the best chili verde recipe and getting it right. So did you perfect it?
I did, but I hate to tell you that I did it by moving away from the recipe, which is part of the point.
Nice.
Yeah, I cannot describe how I do it anymore.
Oh, nice.
Like it's,
my God.
it's like
Asian grandma recipes.
Yeah, no, that's the point. I mean, I started with recipes and I made a bunch, and then somehow they melded in my brain, and now I look at the meat and the peppers, and they're different each time.
Nice.
And then I do some mysterious. I mean, it's like if I described it to you, there would be no. It was like I saute some onions and garlic, and I put some chilies, and I put some meat in, and I cook it for a
easy.
while. Yeah. But then it's like it's everything. It's everything else.
I'm so glad you succeeded.
That's great. Yeah. There was another recipe that involved, I think, jelly beans or something. Maybe it wasn't as good. We do have one final question. It's a less serious question that we like to always part with our guests with, and that's what's poppin'. So, like, what are you into right now? Maybe it's another book. Maybe it's some games you're playing. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's a new yo-yo trick. Like, what's poppin' for you right now?
Wait. Okay. Can I be not fun for a second?
Yes,
Sure.
for sure.
The thing that I'm actually obsessed with is figuring out, I mean, is actually something I really wanted to talk to you all about because this is an education podcast.
Yeah.
But I've been obsessed with a new thing I did in my classroom.
Okay.
And I've been trying to figure out how to do it again, and I don't know how to do it again, but so this is like, this was a response I had to ChatGPT.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know what to do. And
With ChatGPT being available to students and possibly using it for,
And so I was teaching this, it was a tech and design ethics political philosophy class, like politics of technology, basically.
Yep.
And I didn't know what to do. And so I tried an experiment, and I walked into the classroom and I said, "Hey everyone, I don't know what to do about ChatGPT, and this is a tech ethics and political philosophy class. So you're going to figure it out for me." So what I had them do was I had them read a bunch of stuff about automation and the change to the human soul and meaningfulness and what automation did to upskilling and deskilling and what the purpose of education was. And we read Irish Marion Young on democratic inclusiveness. And then for the middle third of the class, they had one project, which is to break into policy groups and propose ChatGPT policies and assignment structures.
Yeah.
And then they argued it out, and then they voted, and I told them, and I just did what they said. And it worked great.
Yeah.
And it's really jarred how I think about teaching because, I mean, it's kind of related to what I was thinking about we were talking in the beginning. Like, I teach a lot of stuff about anti-authoritarianism and democratic reasoning and the wisdom of generating everyone's views. And then until now, whenever I've done grading in the class, I've done it I will tell you exactly what to do because I think I know what's better for you. And I also I think like I can't leave it up entirely to my students because there are, I mean, as we were saying about scoring systems before, like a lot of the way I build my grading involves things that I think that they don't quite have access to about the kinds of practice that will lead them to skills that they don't even know that they have. But also they have a much better sense of their interests about, say, what kind of relationship they want to have to chat. And so it worked incredibly. And it's making me sorry, I should have a fun answer to this, but this
Question everything.
Yeah, no, this is the thing I've been
Yeah.
the degree to which it worked well, and not I mean, they designed a really good system, but they also, the process of figuring out their system
Yep.
was the best
That was-
classroom
yeah.
experience I've had. And I think in the background, part of it was because I staked it with a certain degree of like control. Like
Yep.
I gave it something, but also because, I don't know, it's like, I feel like we say a lot of things about treating our students with respect, and I believe in it. But also, like, I realized I had never really treated my students with full respect until I let them actually control the grading system.
Yep.
And like, I don't have time to do that in every class. It's like very specific to tech and design and political philosophy. But also, it was such a deep experience that I like. It screwed with my sense of how the rest of my classes should be, and I don't know how to recover and be okay with teaching anymore. That's what I've been thinking about.
Whoa.
I could come up with a fun answer. Too, but
I mean, I think what's poppin' is democratic practice
Yeah.
in
Democratic
classrooms.
practice.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Yeah. And that, as you said, is very difficult to do and takes a lot
Yeah,
of
right.
like unbounding of your own control.
And also, there are many ways to do it that sound good in theory, but just result in an empty, listless, undesigned.
Yeah.
If you were just like, okay, students, whatever, tell me whatever you want to do.
Tell me what you want to do. Yeah.
That won't go anywhere good.
Right.
But the walking the like balance
Yeah.
between being a knowledgeable teacher and like it's so
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm I'm great. This is like my whole thing.
Yeah.
So we could talk for another 4 hours
Yeah.
on this,
Yeah.
but absolutely. I mean, a thing I write a lot about and I talk a lot about is the ways in which we can create spaces that are absolutely genuinely student centered. That requires, as I've already said today, some thoughtful constraints, some very thoughtful, well-planned constraints. It also requires a massive amount of support and resources that provide meaningful nudges, right? Like you were giving them some things to read, you were giving them some prompts, you were, and then it also like you hit another key point here is that like the stakes matter. The thing that they're doing actually has meaning beyond just because there's a stupid ass grade at the end of it. Right?
And this is like, I mean, and I see it like, this is one of the reasons I think in the background I've been so obsessed with certain kinds of game design, because some game design at its best is the thing that walks this line between structure and freedom so deeply. Like one way that tabletop role-playing experience can suck is no structure. You're sitting there like, make something up. Okay. And another way it can suck is that you're railroaded into a story. And the true design is such a careful balance of constraint and incentive that actually encourages people to be more free in ways they didn't know they had. And that's what I want for the classroom, and it's so goddamn hard.
It's so hard.
The thing I want to add to that too, though, is that a truly democratic classroom is also co-constructed, right? And that everybody kind of participates, right? And I think sometimes, especially in early childhood, I will say, it is so student-centric that the only people that are participating are the kids, right? Like you're making all the structure so that children are the ones who enter into it, where the teacher is kind of sitting on the side, right, facilitating and managing those things. But I think a really, truly democratic practice is one where everybody really feels like they're co-constructors and contributors of that space, and I think that's what you did.
And that's what and not to bring it, to bring it back to the book, because that's also why I find the arguments you make here so beautiful, that those rules, those kind of constraints, those structures, the invitation to kind of come into that space, but also the willingness to modify them, the willingness to like shift them, the willingness in a classroom to like
make meaning together.
Though that co-construction, the students actually want to go a different way, and to open that up. I think that. I mean, I agree with you. I find this notion of game design, this way of kind of pedagogy and play. I feel it all like is such a beautiful soup.
Well, thank you so much for this delightful
this is great.
conversation. It was very thought-provoking and made me have lots of questions and things to think about. After.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, T. Thanks for being here. Thank you to our listeners. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation, and please share it with others. I think this is a really rich space for thinking and discussion, and so appreciate you coming here.
Thanks, y'all.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye.